Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 62 of College Football Throwdown. I am your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hey there, Husker fans and football fans.
All right. Yes. Welcome back. We are here. It's another edition of the Nebraska Loses podcast. Here to discuss Nebraska's latest loss to Purdue, as well as some of the big games that happened in this week 5 of general college football. But before we dive into that, I think, Dad, you have our traditional beverage to crack.
I do. Yes, I do. I need it today, boy. Up in this cold weather in the northern regions of the United States. Here we go.
There it is.
So I could get this from outside today. I think I didn't even need the fridge.
There you go. So you're gonna take that. You're gonna sip that. Watch that special on the 1997 Husker team, and forget your worries for a day.
For a little bit, at least till tomorrow morning.
There you go. All right. So as we said on last week's podcast, the general tenor, I think, of the podcast going forward is going to be, watching week to week, each game and seeing how we as a team overall improve. It's about improvement rather than, record at this point.
Right.
And, we were hoping, we knew that this Purdue game was a big game because our next series of games are up against a number of tough opponents that we have little chance of winning, whereas with Purdue, we definitely did have a chance in terms of talent and prestige of program and all that sort of stuff. And we did our predictions last week for the game. I went optimistic like I usually do, and I predicted a Nebraska victory of 31-28, whereas you predicted a Nebraska loss of 42-21. And so you ended up being closer. We actually scored one more touchdown than you were predicting. It ended up being kind of like we were discussing, a bit of an offensive battle, especially by the second half. Each team was just kind of scoring on the other indiscriminately.
Right. We did get going offensively in that second half for sure.
Yes. Yeah. For me, the game divides pretty nicely between the halves because definitely in the second half, I felt like things were starting to come together more. Though the defense, which had been making some decent stops earlier in the game, then sort of floundered, and they were scoring when we were scoring, so the game was staying at a 14-point differential. And then later in the game, when the defense did kind of stiffen up and they made some mistakes and we were getting them 3 and out, then we couldn't convert on that offensively. We kind of stuttered, and Martinez was throwing the ball high so often. So that was definitely frustrating to see. So there's a lot to be kind of upset about with this game, but I also think there's a good bit to see positive as well. One of those definitely being Divino Zigbo. He had 17 rushes for 170 yards, and I just he's always been a favorite of ours in the family. Your daughter, my sister Olivia, always loves good old Ziggy, just because I feel like he always puts in the effort.
Yes. I mean, he's an average running back in terms of because of his lack of speed, but he's a very good, powerful runner, and he gets every yard he can get. So you never question his effort necessarily in a game. He was running hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was interesting. I was looking at the stats before the podcast, wrote them down here on my notes, and they're actually quite even overall if you look at it.
Right.
First downs, we had 31 to their 27. We rushed it 39 times for 259 yards. They rushed 37 for 188. We passed for both for about 320 yards each. Same passing attempts ratio. It was 42-25 for both of us. Only difference being that we had one interception, they had none. Total offense, we had 582 yards of total offense. They had 516. Both we had 11 penalties. They had 10. So a lot of similarities there. One point of differential, though, is time of possession. We had the ball for 23 minutes, 44 seconds, whereas they had 36-16, which goes to show how often we were getting 3-and-outed in the first half, and how fast we scored when the offense did get going later on.
Right, and so, yeah, the time of possession stat for our team will never be significant in that we're really not designed offensively to possess the ball and occupy time. You know what I mean? That'll never be a stat that we would expect to dominate.
Mm-hmm. And here's a couple other interesting ones. Third downs, they were 7 of 16 on third downs, whereas we were 4 of 12. And then on fourth downs, we were 0 for 3, while they were 0 for 0. They never got forced into a fourth down that they needed to make. And then red zone scoring chances, they got to the red zone 6 times, and all 6 times they scored, whereas we got there once and scored that one time, which I guess goes to show that we were getting a lot of touchdowns off, bigger passes and things like that. And then we had 1 sack, they had 2. So look at the stat lines overall, relatively even. But Purdue, was just able to capitalize more on the yards that they did get. And that made the difference in the game.
Yeah, well, and also I think another deceptive stat that you shared there was penalties. They had 10, we had 11. That seems fairly equitable. But the types of penalties we had, the timing of those penalties, make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, I do have here. We had 11, they had 10, but ours totaled to 136 yards, whereas theirs were 75, so almost half. So the severity of the penalties was definitely different.
Right.
Yeah, and I know that there was a lot of people upset with the refereeing, and for good reason. Though I do recall there was one time where one of our guys came in and on the replay you could kind of see that he touched the face mask and they didn't call it. So usually in any game there are a couple calls where that was kind of a phantom and it goes your way, and then there's some that are kind of
right.
get missed by the refs going the other side. Though the one where our dude hit their quarterback's head as he was going down, that was the one I was upset about, because he was being pushed by the Purdue guy, and it was immediately after the ball left his hand. It wasn't like it was a full second later or anything.
Right.
So in that situation, you should be allowed to hit the QB,
right,
because you're already right next to him.
And his arm was up in the air to try to block a pass. The strike to the helmet was a very gentle strike because it was more somebody swinging to swat a ball. It wasn't somebody coming down to hammer or to hit in an effort to tackle. He literally had his arm up because he was trying to have it up there. So his arm was already up there, and then he was moving into the quarterback. So his hand just touched the helmet. But it was there to block a pass. So that's one of those things where a ref, you would think, would be able to have enough judgment to recognize that and deem it as for what it really was. It was really obvious in replay. Now, granted, at full speed, maybe you can't judge that, and that's an area of emphasis. The whole striking the head area is super getting super attentive as far as what the refs are looking at. So they just call that stuff super tight. And so you just have to recognize that as a player now. And over time, I would say 2 or 3 years down the road, there'll be enough coaching and enough repetition and technique, and players will become so conscious of it that they won't make that mistake. They will learn techniques for avoiding that. You're going to be taught to swing probably sideways when blocking, or trying to knock down a pass rather than swinging up and down and forward. You're going to be taught to swing sideways so that your swing still might hit the ball, knock it sideways rather than backwards, but you wouldn't then have the momentum to strike the quarterback. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So I think that there's little things like that are going to happen. Now, in addition, there was a missed call on just an absolute obvious holding on Purdue that wasn't called. and then there were a couple of holding calls that were incredibly untimely on our part, that weren't holding calls. They just weren't, and or shouldn't have been, and yet we got them. And so that, again, that gets back to discipline, and that was kind of the theme of Coach Frost's post game press conference: discipline, discipline, discipline. And if I could just quickly rattle off that, he's talking discipline within the game. He's talking about the discipline to use your techniques that you've learned about how to block and when to let go of a block, because everybody grabs jersey now. Everybody is effectively holding. It's just how to hold and get away with it is what the technique is now, and it's all about keeping your hands inside. And as soon as they begin to separate, meaning pull away, because you're blocking them, and all of a sudden the running back has gone around you, and so now they're trying to separate from you instead of coming towards you and engage you you have to let go. And as a blocker, whether you're a wide receiver or a lineman, you have to know when to let go. And our guys seem to be a little late at that, frankly. And so that's a technique thing. It's a discipline thing. I'm sure they're being taught what to do, but they're just not doing it quickly enough. And so we're getting a lot of these, especially I think we had 2 or 3 on our wide receivers at critical points. And so that's a big deal. And that's a discipline thing. And then you have the more obvious discipline things that got a lot of attention, like the personal foul penalties, hitting out of bounds, the holding penalties, the untimely roughing the passer. Those are all things where it's all discipline. But then he speaks of discipline that goes way beyond that. Now, within the game structure, there's also discipline about how you behave within the game. What are you doing when your team is down? Are you staying focused on what you need to be doing on your next play to help your team dig out of the hole that you're in, and to make sure you are redoubling your efforts to not make any mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. And instead, we still have guys out there trying to take advantage of one singular good play that is, advantage Nebraska, and then trying to be hot dogs about it, and being unsportsmanlike in their taunting of the other team and things like that, because they want to be able to do that. Well, you got to stop wanting to do that. Good disciplined players don't care about that crap. They don't care about the jawing and the mouthing and stuff. Maybe when we become great and we're competing for championships, then you can start worrying about your talking. Right now, you shut up and play. And that's the mentality that coach is trying to get instilled. So that's another example. And what I witnessed in this game was him replacing some starters during the course of the game who made those kind of mental mistakes, those discipline mistakes. And some of them you saw them play again, some of them you didn't. Mm-hmm. They missed a good bit of the game. And I don't believe it was because they were hurt. I believe it was because coach is now fed up to the point where he's like, okay, I know this guy is physically and maturity-wise my best choice to play this position. But if he's going to continue to be undisciplined in these other areas, I just as soon have him on the sidelines. And I'll put the next guy in, even though he's not nearly as good as this other guy. Now, if we had greater depth, that would have that getting yanked would have happened a lot sooner than the fourth loss, right? That would have happened a lot sooner. But the reality is we are skeleton thin as a team. And so that makes it harder on coach to make those decisions. He's trying to balance. He needs to be fair to the team that give them the best chance to win. And if you've got a guy, you just hope that guy's going to mature and come along in the whole conditioning of what is the proper character, what is the proper culture for this player to have as part of a team. And he needs his team leaders, and not even team leaders, and in addition to team leaders, just teammates, to say to that guy, hey, clearly that's not the way we're supposed to behave. You can't do that anymore. Yes, that might be what you want to do. That might be what you did in high school, but you're at the University of Nebraska now. This is the new expectation. Adapt, change, improve, because otherwise, even though you're our best talent, you're our best guy at this position, you're not going to play because coach can't afford to have you out there if you're going to keep shooting us in the foot,
Right.
you know? And
Well,
so that's the message.
I remember I wanted to bring it up on last week's podcast, but I forgot it. During the Troy game, there was a touchdown where Stanley Morgan caught a pass, got a good touchdown when we were trying to come back against Troy, and we were still down by 14 points or something like that. And some of his buddies came over to celebrate with him, and he just kind of waved his arm at him, waved him back because he was all business. He knew, we shouldn't be celebrating this. We should be pissed. And we shouldn't be down by 14 points to Troy.
Right. Let's get focused on the next play. Let's be happy. Good. This is wonderful. But don't be going and celebrating and high fiving and chest bumping and all that kind of crap when we're still down.
Exactly.
Let's get back to the sidelines and be talking about what we're going to do next time.
Right.
We get the ball.
And just I didn't watch the full press conference, but I watched parts of it. And he was talking about how there are warriors on this team, and I saw guys out there fighting through to the last play and all that stuff. And I think you can see that, certainly in some of the players who are given great effort throughout the game. But then there's others that aren't. And the vibe I kind of got from that press conference is that we might see even more of that roster shifting
Correct.
that you were referring to, and that until the rest of the team kind of gets the message, he's going to give that play time to people who want to play and who are more hungry for it because they're lower on the depth chart, and will hopefully give him better discipline.
Right. And so that discipline also applies to two other areas. One is within the framework of alignment and assignment in your scheme, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver who needs to be doing a different technique on his route, whether his job is to make sure that he chips a lineman on his way out on a route like a tight end, or a wide receiver who's in motion, whose job is to, if there's a blitz going on, that you need to slow down that blitz, and then you should then immediately know there's a blitz going on, and maybe shortening your route or changing your route to accommodate that so that your young quarterback has somebody that you can throw the ball to on an outlet. But we have guys that are running right past players who are coming free and clear to blitz, and they don't even try to nudge them on the shoulder or put an arm out and chuck them so that it knocks them off their stride and it slows them down a little bit, right? You'd be amazed how if someone's coming full bore in and you hit one of their shoulder pads, that you can sometimes twist them and get them off balance enough because they're running that they can fall. And so even though you didn't have a lot of contact with them, it was enough to disrupt their path to your teammate, the quarterback, right? Or the running back on the who's going to be getting the ball on a handoff and is already going to have a blitzer in his face. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's those kinds of things. And then we have players who are giving great effort, but they may not have the proper discipline with their alignment and assignment, where they're clearly just busting a coverage and guys are running wide open. It was ridiculous how many open receivers Purdue had. Mm-hmm. I mean, on many plays, they had two wide open options for big plays. And he had a choice, basically. And it was whatever was the higher one on the progression is the one who got the ball, probably, in most cases, because Blau's a pretty darn good quarterback. I'm watching one right now as we're reviewing the Big Ten game in 60 minutes. A huge play where a tight end ran totally wide open right down the middle of the field because we had two players go with one of the players and then another guy just go completely, just left him completely, just left him.
Right.
He had him, he was lined up with him, and then he just went in like he was going to go tackle somebody, or he was going in on a running play, got totally faked out by a completely bogus fake handoff, and then the tight end runs down the field by 45 yards.
Right.
It's just ridiculous.
Now, you'll remember that when we would talk about Bo Pelini's teams back in the day, we would talk about his defensive scheme and how it was, a good scheme, conceptually, but also very complicated, and that
right.
the players would sometimes, be shrugging their arms up like, what do I do? I don't know, and not know exactly what they're supposed to do
Right.
in a particular situation. Do you think part of that is what's happening here, or is it, because it's the first year in this new system, or is it just more the undisciplined study by our guys? They just don't know the game book.
Well, yeah, I would say that no, it's not that the defensive scheme that coach is trying to implement is too complicated. I think it's more that this is the third defensive coordinator in 4 years for these guys, and or 3 years actually, third in 3 years, and so these guys' heads are still spinning a little bit about, they don't have, even if they're a junior or senior and they've been a starter for 2 or 3 years, they still are in their first year with this system, right? And the assignments are different. And so they're still making mental mistakes that you just can't be making at this point in the season. Now, there are plenty of first-year coaches who've been able to implement their defenses with far greater success than us. So that comes back to discipline in terms of, are you doing the things you have to do? And that's was going to be the other part of discipline. When Coach talked about that so much in the press conference after the game, he was also talking about all of those other things off the field that have to do with football and that don't have to do with football. It's about studying film. It's about understanding the game plan. It's about practicing hard on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday to learn the game plan and to know exactly what you're supposed to do and when you're supposed to do it. Okay? It's also about making sure that you're taking care of your business, that you're going to class, that you're going to the study halls when you're scheduled to be at the study halls, that you're eating the types of food and when you're supposed to, according to the training table regimen that's been assigned for you. Because each one of these players has a nutritional structure that they've been given for them specifically based on their position and body type and what kind of weightlifting program they're doing, all that stuff, okay? And some of these guys may not be doing that. And he went as far as to talk about how they, last week it was about the airplane and keeping the airplane clean when you go on an away game, and not trashing it. Today he was talking about things like treating the staff who serve you meals at the training table and, do all that kind of stuff, that would be covered as well. You treat them with respect, like you would expect to be treated, that you don't treat them crappy. So it's just all those things added up to demonstrate a player who's committed and disciplined in their life, right? And that's what coach is trying to establish as the standard. And right now, there's just a lot of guys that didn't have that kind of expectation in the past with the past coaching staffs. And I'm not saying just Riley. I think that goes back to Bo too. And Scott is trying to build a different culture. And some guys just aren't getting it or are not willing to embrace that yet. Not that they don't like Scott Frost or that they don't want to play well, but they don't understand and they don't get the connection between the fact that how you treat somebody who serves you a meal, at the training table, how you treat that person affects how you play. It affects how you prepare to play. It affects everything about your life and the type of person you are, right? Can you be counted on as a teammate? Those are the things that coach is talking about. Those are pretty deep, subjects, but Scott clearly feels very passionately that that's a big part of the problem, because he inherited a team at UCF that had lost 12 games. They had a loser mentality too, but he was able to get them to turn it around and at least get to moderate success in his first year, right? They did win some games. Now, circumstances are different. It's a whole different deal, but he was able to see more progress in what he was trying to accomplish. There have been some roadblocks with this team that I think even he didn't expect, because they have been slow to get rid of these problems that are plaguing us. Again, you went over all the stats. We produced enough yards that if we take away some of those mental breakdowns and some of those mental mistakes that lead to penalties, those two things, we're right in that football game. And so unlike the Michigan game where we were completely outclassed and they just crushed us, this was a game where it was about our discipline versus theirs. Purdue's a very well-coached team. Great admiration for the coach at Purdue and his staff. and um,
Yeah.
they are a disciplined team.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was interesting that the commentators on the game were talking about how much improved Purdue was from last year to this year, because wasn't last year the first year of this new coaching staff?
Correct. Yes.
Right. And so they were almost saying that, like, what they were like last year is kind of our situation this year, and that, hopefully if Scott Frost keeps at it, then we might see a transformation, in the second year of his program, kind of like they're seeing here in their
Oh, I
second
agree.
year with their head coach, which I thought was an interesting point of comparison.
And I believe we will, assuming that we can get enough of the right players to buy in. We still are in a situation where we have such a fragile depth situation, such a thin depth situation that if some of these players, who are our most talented players, do not buy in and don't embrace the fact that what used to be okay, what was okay last year with Riley in terms of you jawing and mouthing off to the opponents, even when you're getting beat and things of that nature, was considered acceptable behavior, or they were ignored basically by the coaching staff, is now something of a problem for Scott. And when you're challenged in that way, how are you going to respond? Are you going to step up and say, you know what, coach, you're right. I'm going to embrace your philosophy and I'm going to change my ways? Or are they going to say, well, screw this, and just tank and give up? And even though they're the most talented player, and I'm going to name a name here, and it's Lamar Jackson, and he was one of them. I mean, we've been waiting and waiting for this kid to finally start to exhibit what we thought he was going to be. And ironically, his backup at the same position, Eric Lee, both of those guys, four-star players. Lamar Jackson, one of the highest four-star players we've ever gotten in recent years, and he's still making bonehead mistakes, penalties. He's one of the first ones to be jawing and mouthing off. He was really mouthy during the Colorado game, and then I wasn't as attentive to it at the Troy game. But then obviously no one was mouthing off at Michigan because there's nothing to mouth off about. But then in this game, he was doing it again, even though we were getting beat. And it's like, you can't do that. Now the opposite corner, DiCaprio Boodle, stud. I will absolutely go to war with that guy, as Coach Frost said. He's a guy. He's a real man, and he's playing hard. And I love what I'm seeing from him, even though he had a couple pass interference penalties, but frankly, those were bad calls. That was great defense, and I think he's going to be a great one for us. But we need some of these other guys like Lamar Jackson and like Tyjon Lindsey, who are very, very talented players, could really be helping our team right now. But because of their lack of discipline, they're not getting there. And then there are guys like even our one of our leading tacklers, if not our leading tackler, Mo Berry, who people love because he plays really hard and he's an aggressive attacking style player. He's still making way too many mental mistakes, too many assignment alignment problems with him, and our other linebackers too. I mean, they're just not getting it done. And then our defensive line. I mean, throughout the game, the commentators kept talking about the fact that right now one of our defensive coordinator's problems is he cannot get a pass rush with four guys. He has to blitz to get any kind of pass rush. You know what? That so limits what you can do defensively if you're forced to blitz just to get a pass rush. You need to be able to get pressure with your starting four. And right now, we ain't getting squat. And so we're having to bring a fifth guy, or the quarterback's got all day.
Right.
And that's a problem.
And that's it. Sorry. And that's against Purdue's, offensive line, who, they're solid, but they're certainly, nothing compared to Michigan or Wisconsin or Ohio State, the other teams we're going to be playing later down the line
Right.
here.
Right.
And so how I want to wrap this up is, we talked last week about how, we already knew all these things about the discipline and the culture that Scott Frost is trying to kind of overcome and everything. And the theme last week was, okay, we just got our butts handed to us by Michigan, but they were a better team than us. We already knew that. Purdue is a good team, but a team near our level that we are definitely capable of beating. So this was the game where we could turn around, get something positive going for the team. To
Yes.
take into this next stretch of games against tough opponents that we have up against us. Now,
Right.
we didn't see that turnaround in discipline. There was definitely a shift at halftime and into the second half. And the offense started get things rolling a little more. The defense was playing a little harder. So there were some positive signs to take away from that. But now we're looking at going against Wisconsin next week, Northwestern the week after that, Minnesota the week after that. When do you think we're going to see this shift in discipline, or if we're going to see it at all? Like where does this leave us kind of now that we're still at 0 wins, the worst start for a Nebraska team since 1945?
Yeah. Well, it's not likely to happen next week against Wisconsin. They are, again, a very established program, extremely disciplined. Their defense is one of the best in the country, much like Michigan's was. And so they're going to make life very difficult for our offense. And so it's, we scored 28 points in this game. And even if we cleaned up our mental mistakes that we can clean up, you're probably still going to struggle against a great defense like Wisconsin's. Now, what is our defense going to do against, the best offensive line or one of the best offensive lines in college football? If we couldn't do it against Purdue's offensive line, what are you going to do against Wisconsin's, right? So that those matchups do not bode well for us next week. Now, you would have liked to have hoped that we would have found a way to win against Purdue. And that would have been the start of, okay, now we have a blueprint. Now we have a little bit of confidence. It's about confidence, too. We've talked a lot about that on our podcast so far this year, that our guys just are China dolls in terms of their mental makeup and confidence. And they need some positive things to happen for them so that they can begin to learn and appreciate what Coach Frost is trying to get them to achieve. Right now, they have no evidence. Scott's telling them what he wants them to do, but they have no evidence that if we do those things, we're going to win football games because they haven't done it. You know what I mean? Because they haven't been able to, as a group, have those disciplines. And so, it just hasn't come to fruition. If it had come together this week and we had been able to eliminate a lot of those mistakes, then and clean up some of the things we weren't doing well, like special teams, then we might have been in a position where, some of the changes in personnel that happened over the last week, the light bulbs would have gone on for some of those players who had diminished playing time, and they would have said, "Oh, okay, if I know that I really am going to have to make these changes, or I'm not going to see the field." But because we didn't win, now they don't feel that way. They might still get the opportunity to try again because Coach put in the other guy and he didn't do any better, right? So now maybe this guy gets his a chance to get his job back again without having to make the discipline changes that he needed to make. Okay, that's where competition ultimately is such a great barometer and controller for your team, because everybody knows that if they aren't giving it their all every play on every practice, that the guy right behind them is going to take their job. They don't feel that way right now. There's not enough depth on the team to make guys feel that way. And then when they come in and don't perform, the guy who's the starter knows, I'm not going to get replaced by that guy. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. So
okay. Now, but then I want to go a step further. So then the question is, when can we expect it? I would have to argue that at Northwestern, who almost beat Michigan this week, by the way, we are going to play at Northwestern. That's another team that physically we should be able to match up fairly equitably to. Again, but we're going to be playing a team that's very mature in their systems, very, very disciplined, excellent coach, and they're not going to give us anything. So they're not going to make a mistake. They're not going to throw stupid interceptions. They're not going to do the things that we do. So the only way we can hope to compete against a team like that is to not make those mistakes, to not do those things, and then let our athletes match up with their athletes, and maybe we have a chance there. So if you're asking me, I would say Wisconsin is going to be another one of these games that, frankly, we're just going to have to find a way to hunker down and get through it. And that means not giving up, hoping that we can play hard on defense, slow down their offense enough that our offense can put some pressure on their defense, because we do have some talent on offense. We showed that in the Purdue game. We've got some guys that if we were clicking and had that faster pace, we could create some problems. But Adrian Martinez has to play better. He has to make better decisions. He can't be throwing those high balls, like you said, especially late in the game when 2 or 3 times he threw, bad throws that were too high or in the dirt or whatever, and, didn't even have a chance of being a completion. He needs to be able to make those decisions, go through progressions, find the open receivers. Those are things that he'll learn. He'll get better. But right now, Northwestern is the next winnable game, in my opinion. And then when we get back for Minnesota. So if we could establish something at Northwestern and actually get a win, then I think you come back to Minnesota with great enthusiasm in Lincoln. We've got to win now. We've seen some measurable progress, let's say, because we played Wisconsin tough, let's say, and we clearly showed some progress there and cleaned up some things, even though we lost. And then we go to Northwestern and we actually beat them, or we make more progress but don't win. If there was some progression of, like you said, we're now measuring different things. It's not about wins and losses. It's about eliminating mistakes and understanding our alignment and assignment and starting to play team football. If we can start to do that, then we'll get closer to a victory. And at some point we'll have that breakthrough. Then once we do, I think that there could be a chance for an aha moment that then takes it to another level. Because we have some talent. I mean, Martinez had like one of the 15 most productive days in the history of Nebraska football yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
So, the guy's a player.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'm frustrated with like the high passes, and some, like, there was one where he was getting sacked and he threw the ball.
Yeah.
As he was getting sacked, which could have easily been an interception. But those are things. He's a true freshman. Like, as long as he stays healthy, and learns over the course of the season, like you can already see how great he could be by next year, or the year after that.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to there. And I was just looking ahead at our schedule. It seems to me like in a best case realistic scenario, we'd end the season with 5 wins at this point. If we could somehow find a way to beat Northwestern, Minnesota, Bethune-Cookman, Illinois, and Iowa, that would be 5 wins. I could also see us like winning maybe against Bethune-Cookman and maybe Illinois and losing to everyone else, and we have 2 wins, or 0. At this point, like it's very kind of variable depending on how if the team kind of clicks and comes together or doesn't.
Exactly. And now the challenge for the team's leadership is to keep guys focused on, what our goal is all about, building the foundation for the future. This is not a championship team. It's clearly not going to be. But what we want to do is go out every week and play as hard as we can play and try to maximize our improvement as a team every week. Now, whether that translates into a win or not is not even as important as us focusing on individually making ourselves better. And then the winning will take care of itself. And so, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, we need to start measuring that. So we can talk about what's the score going to be, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be about what would I like to see next week against Wisconsin. I would like to see us defensively show or demonstrate that we have the ability to have proper alignment and assignment, where when they go into pass patterns, there aren't guys running wide open all over the frickin' place, that we actually have people covered. Okay. And the discipline of the scheme. If we know we're in a man-to-man coverage, okay, this happened in the Purdue game 2 or 3 times. When you know that your back end, your wide receiver, or your defensive backs and your linebackers are on a man coverage, and there is basically either one back or no backs in the backfield, then as a defensive line, you need to understand that, and you need to know that your job is to squeeze the pocket, not to just aggressively try to cut a gap and then end up running into your own player and ending up in a big pile. Okay, so then there's no one left to contain that quarterback and keep him from running away. And you take a very average, not fleet of foot quarterback who makes two or three major, conversions of first downs because there is no one left to defend him. Because you attacked without any lane discipline whatsoever, and on two occasions, guys were running into each other. Our own defensive linemen were running into each other because they didn't even know what the hell they were supposed to be doing. I don't know if they're given free reign to say, pick your spot and go. And if that's the case, then that's a shitty defensive scheme. And I would have to blame some of that on the coaches. But I have a feeling that's not what they're being coached. But at the end of the day, all of a sudden they're both on a heap in the pile on the ground, and the quarterback is running for 35 yards to a first down.
Right. Yeah. No.
And that's the kind of crap you can't do when you're on man-to-man, because everybody's back is turned. They don't know that it's a run until it's well past the line of scrimmage. And there's nobody there. There's nobody there. And again, I kind of question that scheme myself. I mean, if those linemen should know that, and they should be behaving differently than they do, or if they're going to attack like that, then you can't have everybody in coverage with their back turned. Because you've got to have somebody, both teams only have 11 players. There should be somebody left to cover the quarterback. So you either keep one linebacker in, and instead of having two guys on one guy out that's running a fly pattern down the field. Great, you have that guy covered with two of our guys. Therefore, the quarterback's running free. That's stupid, right? So there's some of that has to be ironed out. So what I'm looking for is improvements in that alignment and assignment. Even if they outperform us, the receiver makes the catch anyway. But it's a great catch. It's a great throw. Okay, I can live with that. What I can't live with is the wide open blow-ups. And then offensively, same kind of thing. You got to block. You got to do the little things. You got to get open. You got to run precise routes. You got to know when the quarterback's getting blitzed and break off your route in the proper way so that you give him a chance to give him a short pass option instead of him getting crushed. Those are all the little things. No more turnovers. No more stupid penalties. Those are the measures of success at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree with everything you just said there. All right.
Okay.
So let's move on to some of the big games that happened in Week 5 of college football. Yes. The big one that we were excited about that we predicted last week was the Ohio State-Penn State game.
Yes.
I had predicted a 31-24 Ohio State victory. You predicted 42-31 Ohio State. And the final score ended up being quite a bit more low scoring than we were expecting, 27-26. It was even lower before the fourth quarter. There was a lot of scoring in the fourth quarter by both teams. And once again, the past 2 years those teams have played, they've all been close games. And this year was no different. It came right down to the wire, and I got to tune in for the fourth quarter to watch, which was pretty fun.
Yes, those were excellent. It was an excellent game, I should say. And I'm disappointed in the outcome. I felt like Penn State, deserved to win the game. They were the better team for the majority of the game, but then they just couldn't get it done at the end. And I kind of questioned a few critical calls at the end of the game that were made in terms of what they tried to do to try to score again. But Ohio State was simply just a little bit better. And the fact that Ohio State was able to do that during a whiteout at Penn State, which is a very hard environment to go into and play Penn State at night and win, that's impressive victory for Ohio State. Very impressive. Now, equally impressive, but in a different way. In a different way, not equally. I should say impressive, but in a different way. Is Michigan's comeback against Northwestern? Northwestern found a way to basically take advantage of Michigan's sleepwalk because they thought every team was going to lay down like Nebraska did the previous week, apparently, and so they did not play well in the first half at all. But then they came out and just slowly chipped away and eventually found a way to win that game. And that's what good teams do. That's what talented teams do. Guys make plays. And Michigan and Ohio State, two of the most talented teams, if not the most talented teams in our league, both demonstrated what happens when you have that kind of talent. And if you want to win championships, that's what you got to be able to do.
Right. I think Northwestern was up 17-0 at one point, and then Michigan, like you said, just slowly came back and ended up winning 20-17. So Northwestern, I believe that they're 0-4 right now. They have not won a game, but they've had close games against better competition.
Well, actually, Alex, Northwestern actually did beat Purdue in that first game of the year. It was a tough game, but so they're actually 1-3, not 0-4. But I get your point about the fact that they had they've played a lot of tough, close games, even though they've lost 3 of them. They're a very good football team.
Yeah, okay, you're right. I forgot about that Purdue game, which was also a close game. Purdue almost beat them in turn. Speaking on that topic of Purdue, a team that we played and lost to, we played and lost to Colorado, who played against UCLA this past week and beat them quite convincingly, 38-16. Now, they seem to be going through a transition over there. They're having some struggles because they're 0-4 right now, like we are. So that win is not as impressive as it may appear to be on paper, just from prestige of programs, but still goes to show you that Colorado team has some genuine talent on it, for sure.
Right, absolutely. Well, and in general, I mean, I think we just have to recognize that, going into the season, we knew we had a tough schedule. We were going to play a lot of good football teams, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Colorado ends up being a bowl team. That Troy, a team we played and lost to earlier, doesn't end up winning 10 games or so, and maybe play in a bowl game and win their conference. All those things are very real possibilities for those two opponents. And then obviously Michigan is a very talented football team, and Purdue, even though their record isn't very good. Again, another team that has played hard and has talent and has found ways to beat itself a little bit, much like us. So the idea, the concept that Nebraska would be able to figure it out, so to speak, stop beating themselves, stop making all the dumb mistakes that they've been making that have hurt them, and all of a sudden turn things around, and as a result of that, cleaning up their own efforts, translate into some wins. You could see that happening. The challenge, though, is, of course, this week we have to go on the road again and play, a top 10 Wisconsin team.
Yes. Well, yeah. No, we, like you said, we knew from the beginning it was going to be a tough schedule. I forget what it was, but we were like in the top 5 toughest schedules of the year, like in the preseason. I remember a little ranking coming out about that, because even our non-conference teams aren't pushovers. They were tough opponents in their own right, compared to where we're perceived to be. Another interesting game, one of the other big games that everyone was paying attention to last week was Notre Dame-Stanford. But Notre Dame ended up winning that game also convincingly, 38-17. And I remember some of the pundits on TV saying that with that win, Notre Dame now has a very reasonable schedule left to them, that they could be in playoff contention if they can just keep this up.
Correct. Their schedule is definitely front loaded with a lot of the more challenging games, early in the season. Winning that Michigan game right out of the blocks like they did helped catapult them, and that kind of again shows you what some positive momentum can do for a team. I don't think Michigan and Dame are all that different, and certainly the game they played against each other would suggest they were fairly evenly matched. And yet, there's still question marks in everybody's mind about how good a team is Michigan, and then Notre Dame, is kind of building momentum. So it's all about finding W's, right? Finding a way to win.
Right. Well, and on that topic, there were a couple close games that stood out to me. Clemson and Syracuse. Clemson won
Yeah.
27-23, and then Texas, Kansas State. Texas won 19-14. So both close games that you won't necessarily expect to be close.
Well, especially that Clemson game because Syracuse was the team that surprisingly or unexpectedly upset Clemson last year, and so you knew that Clemson was going to not overlook them, and that this was going to be an A game performance you would have expected from Clemson, and yet they again kind of laid an egg and did not play well. Frankly, should have lost. I mean, they were outplayed the vast majority of the game by Syracuse, and then their talent just overcame it at the end, and that leads us to what was the other score? Oh, the Texas Kansas State game. Kansas State just always plays very disciplined football, and so with inferior talent, they're always in games, and very well coached by Coach Schneider, and but again, talent wins out in the end, and much like the Michigan Northwestern game and the Ohio State Penn State game, which again are two examples of what I believe are teams with just superior talent that eventually find a way to win. And those teams almost frustrate you with how they can look like crap, and then yet at the end of the day find a way to make just enough plays with their athletes to win the game that they're in. Michigan was down 17-0 in Northwestern,
Yeah.
and then came back and won it 20-17.
Yep. Yep. Funny how that works for sure. Well, and I've noticed, and this is just a kind of trend in general, but maybe more so this year, than usual. A lot of scoring in the fourth quarter, either by the teams that are down or by both teams, that happened in the Penn State, Ohio State game, which we discussed. It kind of happened in our game against Purdue. So, just like you said, the better team might play worse for 3 quarters, but if they can kind of, the other team gets tired, or, their depth of talent lets them, rotate guys more. And so then in that fourth quarter, they're able to, get a couple big plays, and all of a sudden, bam, they win the football game,
Exactly. Yep. That's what happens. So that's one of the things that Nebraska was the beneficiary of for many, many years. And now we're on the other end of that stick. And again, you could rewind to our game against Purdue, and the reality is that we got guys that aren't performing because we don't have depth of talent that we can roll in the next guy and not expect a significant drop off. So we choose not to. And so we live with guys who are making mental mistakes, making decisions and just choices that are unacceptable. And yet our coaches are hesitant to immediately pull them until recently, because they're just trying to work with that individual player to work them through it, because the other alternative isn't one that's acceptable. And right. You'd like to think that if we can just show some continuity and stability with our coaching staff, that 3 years from now we won't be in that situation. We'll be in a situation where we have another guy, next guy up, ready to go. And so if a guy isn't mentally focused on what he needs to be focused on, then he's going to get benched rather quickly. And then, you know what? After that one-time benching, oftentimes those kids respond and recognize that, oh, gee, this is how I have to behave from now on if I want to keep my job and keep playing and, pursue my dream or whatever. And they make the necessary changes. If that requirement isn't placed on them, that change, that maturity, it just doesn't happen. It gets blunted.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and my concern is, let's say that, we will have a 2 or 3 wins season this year, which is very reasonable at this point. But Frost, succeeds at his goal of getting the team to play better. There's more of that effort being put in. We're making less mistakes, so we do see improvement, but we still, don't win many games. That is going to make it tougher for him on the recruiting trail because recruits are going to see like, oh, a 3-win Nebraska team. I don't want to be part of like a rebuilding period here. I want to go and win championships right out of the gate. So obviously Scott Frost's reputation and how he turned around UCF, helps with that perception, I think, but it's still going to be a challenge. So all the more important that we turn things around in this later half of the season and show that we are a football team that plays hard and that has good team camaraderie and all those pluses that a player would like, that we play teams close even if we lose against better talent. All those things will help us even if our record is still 2 or 3 wins.
Exactly. Yeah, those things become very important. So those intangibles, those other elements of not so much a victory, but maybe of a competitive loss, start to become important because, as a fan base, I think we have to attach to that, and that doesn't mean we're all about moral victories. But what it does mean is I think there needs to be some legitimate recognition of this as a process. There are stepping stones we have to make, and when we see the opportunity, we have to seize the opportunity, and that opportunity might present itself this weekend. I mean, you don't know if all of a sudden this weekend we came to play with an intensity that we like we had say at the Colorado game, but we play much more error free, both in terms of mental mistakes, execution, alignment, and assignment. All those things clean up. All of a sudden we could find ourselves in a game where we have a chance to win against a team as talented as Wisconsin, in the fourth quarter. Well, now, if we get to that spot, what do? Do we, again, piss down our legs and fall apart, or do we find a way to win? If we were to find a way to win and have that surprising victory, that could open the door then for, next steps. But even if we don't find that way, but we show the glimpses, then that's a stepping stone. That's a building block that we take to the following game against, say, Northwestern, and see what happens there. And you just got to find a way. And right now, we don't even know what that way is.
Yep. So we got to find that way, for sure.
Exactly.
So looking ahead to next week's games, there aren't that many big games on the national level, but 2 stand out to me. One is LSU Florida. And then the other is, of course, the Big 12 rivalry between Texas and Oklahoma. So what do you make of those 2 games?
Well, I hadn't really put much thought into the LSU-Florida matchup. I feel like that LSU-Florida matchup is intriguing. Now that I know it's on the schedule, I'm going to try more to... do you know if that's the night game or is that during the day? I don't know the timing of that game.
But, I don't know. Rick, I'll look it up.
Yeah, but I was just going to mention to you that LSU is obviously one of the surprise teams of that league, and they are playing pretty good football, and so I'll be curious to see how they perform. Florida is in a rebuilding mode, so this is a game where I would say LSU it's winnable. It's one that LSU needs to win if they're going to try to be a factor in the SEC. Going forward this season, and yet it's very much doable. I think there have been other years here in the recent past where LSU might have looked at a matchup like this and kind of been there, done that, and I don't like the ending. But I have a feeling that they're growing some momentum there, and that this could be a watershed moment for them. Now on the opposite side, Florida, much like Nebraska, is going through that transition, new coach, et cetera, and they've had their struggles. But I get a sense that they also are maybe finding themselves a little bit. So that's an intriguing matchup just from the standpoint of where those 2 teams sit. One on the precipice of maybe taking that next step to real significant factor, and the other one in that first step of rebuilding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just looked it up. It's actually an afternoon game, not at night, but it is at Florida. And I haven't been following the national stuff as much as you probably have, so I wasn't aware that LSU is currently ranked number 5 via the AP poll,
Right.
which is obviously very high, and so I wasn't aware that they had that much success this year. So that
Yep.
you're right. This will be definitely a challenge for them to kind of prove themselves worthy of that rank.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And then with the Texas Oklahoma game, that is also at Oklahoma, which I would view Texas as the underdog wherever it was played, and so that makes it even tougher for Texas. But they have been, and we just mentioned that they nearly lost to Kansas State last week, but they've also had some good wins, and they seem to have kind of gotten things together. That loss right at the beginning of the season kind of woke them up a little bit, I think. So we'll have to see how they do. I would definitely still give the edge to Oklahoma myself, but I think Texas will make it interesting.
I would agree. I think Texas is going to make it interesting because the Red River Shootout is always an interesting football game, and it always brings out the best in both of those squads, and so the talent for Texas will definitely be focused and keyed in to what they're trying to do. And again, another team that's in the second year of their head coach, starting to get things a little bit more. But as a result, like anything else, it's not a linear process, that growth pattern. You're going to have some successes, and then you're going to take a falter step, and then you're going to have success again. So it's one of those that's a little bit unpredictable, a little inconsistent what you can expect from Texas. I think that's what we've already observed, and we'll continue to observe this season with them. But they're certainly capable of making things very interesting. Remember Oklahoma almost lost here recently as well. So they're a team that is not unbeatable by any stretch.
Yep.
But if Oklahoma plays their best and Texas plays their best, then Oklahoma wins, and probably comfortably. But if for some reason Oklahoma were to be a little mistake prone and that sort of stuff, which they have a tendency to do every now and then possibly a Texas team that was playing to its max potential could make things very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to do our score predictions here, and I went ahead and wrote down mine for the Texas-Oklahoma game. I'm going to say Oklahoma wins 38-28 over Texas.
Okay, that's a good score. I love the way you think about these numbers. You think more than I do about that sort of thing. I'm gonna say I also expect an Oklahoma victory. I'm gonna say that I think it's gonna be higher scoring. It'll start out lower scoring, but then like in the second half, it'll be one of these things where they run up and down the field on each other. Is what I'm guessing. So I'm gonna say it's gonna end up being like 47-27.
Okay, gotcha. Not
And
bad.
Oklahoma's the victor.
Right. I guess that. And then we have our Wisconsin-Nebraska game. Last week I was being optimistic. I predicted that Nebraska would win against Purdue. Kind of got disappointed by that one. So I'm gonna be a little more realistic, and especially since we're playing against Wisconsin, I have hopes that we'll do better and be more together as a team and make less mistakes. But with just how good Wisconsin's defense is, I think our offense is really going to struggle to score. So I'm personally predicting a 49-10 victory for Wisconsin.
Okay. Yep, I get it. I would say that you might be onto something there. I'm going to give us a little more credit, though. I'm going to say, just so the number isn't exactly the same, I'm going to say it's going to be 45 Wisconsin, and it's going to be 24 for Nebraska. 45-24.
Okay, so a little bit more competitive.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I was thinking when you were talking about the Wisconsin game earlier, we've had some, even last year, we had a close game with them, as I recall.
Yes.
It seems to alternate between like us having close competitive games or ones where we get blown out by them. So I'm not
Well,
sure what it's going to
even
be.
last year's was a blowout. It just didn't happen until really late. Basically, we were competitive for the first half, and then sometime midway through the third quarter, they just decided, oh, we realize now that we can run on Nebraska at will, and then they ran the ball like 28 of the next 27 snaps and just beat us to death.
Yeah,
with a sledgehammer.
Now that you brought that up, I do remember that quite vividly.
Yes. So it was close for a while. In fact, we even had a lead, I think, at point like late in second half or second quarter rather. So I mean, it was one of those deals where we were right in it. Now, but this year it's at Camp Randall. It's not in Lincoln. It's up in Wisconsin, and so the combination of that, what I would be. Here's one for you. Does their All-American and Heisman Trophy candidate running back Taylor, how many yards is over 150, under 150, or over 250? I'm going to give you three choices.
So
just him, not the team, just Taylor, Jonathan Taylor.
I guess I'll go over 150. If it's over 250, that would be rough.
Well, there's a history with Wisconsin running backs doing that. I'm going to predict that it's over 250.
All right.
I'm not kidding. I'm just telling you that's where we're at with regard to our defense line. The thing that scares me the most about the Purdue game, of all the things that I witnessed, probably the one that's lingering in my head here, is the fact that our defensive line was unable to, on its own, get even a modest amount of pressure on their quarterback. And if we think we can, stay with Wisconsin, who has the best offensive line in the country, when we couldn't even, generate pressure against Purdue, I'm telling you, our defensive line and linebackers are in for a long day against Wisconsin, unless something magical happens.
Yep. I think Nebraska fans have to prepare themselves for something rough, but we knew this was going to probably be a loss from the beginning of the season. This is one of our toughest games, so we just kind of have to, do our best, weather the storm, and look ahead to the next game and the next thing to improve. That's how we have to be thinking right now. That has to be our mindset.
As a fan, I would agree with you. I'd like to hope that our players are preparing and working as hard as they possibly can, with every expectation that if they played to their best abilities, that they could beat Wisconsin. And they could watch a film like they of last year and just watch that first half and say, see, we were able to stay with this team. We were able to hang with these guys for 2.5 quarters. Let's find a way to do that.
Yep.
So, but as a fan, I'm with you. I'm 100% in agreement.
Right. All right. Well, I think this was a good episode 62 of College Football Throwdown. If you all out there enjoyed listening, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can find us online at footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. You can leave a comment there or rate and review us on iTunes. You can search College Football Throwdown and find us there. We always like to hear from people. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Dad, for co-hosting with me today. And until next week, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.